Hey everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Snapchat. I'm joined today by none other than Cozy Snap. Cozy, Marvel Snap, it's been a lot of craziness in this past week, and I gotta ask you, what has been the deck that you've been playing the most that you think is the spiciest brew you've come up with?
Oh my gosh, there's so many Supergiant ones. I think right now is a Taskmaster Supergiant deck, which I think is similar to like what you got going on, like these big power cards snuck out. You had Taskmaster on 5 after Supergiant, and then you play something giant at the end there. Maybe if you're lucky, you can do Infinite with a turn 7. Super fun, spicy deck, and I did a good chunk of my climbing with it, but this season's opened up a ton of like spicy builds, if you will.
Oh, there's no doubt about it that Taskmaster turn 5 has been one of my favorite synergies with Supergiant. I mean, we may as well just dive right into Supergiant if we're already going to be talking about her, but Supergiant was the card released here in the Spotlight caches, a particularly strong week. Supergiant, you've got Zabu and Darkhawk. They're Series 4 cards, Zabu Darkhawk that is, but you gotta have them in your collection, unbelievable. And you're right, Taskmaster has been one of my favorite uses of Supergiant, and what I like about it is that with Supergiant and Taskmaster, you're playing it offensively, but you have that defensive fallback where you just might be messing them up as well, which has been one of my favorite things about Supergiant as a whole. When I first started playing Supergiant, when I was trying to approach my deck building, and I'll talk about a deck or two in a second, I was like, okay, we have the defensive play. Like, we know why we use like a Leech or a Sandman or whatever. We understand those defensive plays. Supergiant has that defensive capability, but I don't feel like it's as reliable as a Sandman. Sandman's effect is very exacting, for instance. However, I was thinking to myself, if we can use Supergiant offensively, that means that the defensive characteristic is just pure gravy. And if you mess up that Jane Job play, if you mess up, Lady Thor, you mess up their Leech or whatever, that's just pure gravy. So I love the Taskmaster. I was playing a deck very similar with Taskmaster. Even if you just play Hulk on turn 7, right? He's often like 18 power, right? It's kind of crazy what you can do with him. So I've been really, really enjoying Supergiant.
Yeah, I mean, this was the card that we both said we had to just play to know how good she was going to be. And ultimately, no one's playing the decks that she counters hard right now. That's a fool's errand, especially. But that doesn't change. At the top of the meta, you have a lot of Leech decks, a lot of Darkhawk, a lot of High Evo. You have a ton of different Sarah decks. You have a ton of Jane Foster decks. Those are going to, fall down hard when Supergiant is available to play. But you also have, like, Tribunal, who doesn't give a rip about your Supergiant. It's just going to play its Iron Man and do its thing. If anything, maybe it helps it a little bit because it protects the Iron Man. So you do have this back and forth. Ultimately, what did you end up on it as the star rating? I think we both gave her about a 3.5 last week. Where are you at now?
Yeah, we definitely gave her a 3. For me, she's definitely a 4-star card. I like her 4-star. I think she's definitely a lot of fun to play. In terms of like meta aggregate stats, she probably falls closer to a 3-star, I think. She's a little niche. She doesn't have like the wide ranging application that, you'd want in a 4 or 5-star card. She doesn't fit like inherently in any one particular archetype. So she's kind of in this weird limbo. You know what I mean? Like, she's in this weird limbo where it's like, you kind of don't really know what to do with her yet still. Yeah. But I do like the card. For me, it's a 4. I can see meta relevance being a 3, but I like the card a lot. How about you?
And that makes sense because I'm all about the 0.5s. But in my review, I gave her a 3.5 with the release valve of the meta, right? Like, she's going to serve as that. I also think that, like, I will play her more than I play Cosmo is the way that I look at her, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, my play rate of Cosmo right now is maybe that's more indicative of that. But in general, like, Supergiant, you said that the offense thing, there's not a ton of cards that can benefit offensively from Supergiant, but there are the ones that you have are almost win conditions in itself. Now, when we say she doesn't deserve it in an archetype, I think Lockdown's her archetype, bar none. I think that it just works with the deck to the fullest degree. That's where I've seen the most success stat-wise as well. Absorbing Man, though, Absorbing Man on turn 5, yeah, you lose a little bit of your, spice. But Absorbing Man on 5, followed with a Doctor Doom on 6, a Leader on 6. I mean, there's some silly combos that you can do. We've seen the Hit Monkey, obviously, as well. That kind of stuff is game-winning. But then you're relying on a couple of cards that all hit at once, and that can be tough, right? But, dude, you definitely have had to try a little lockdown with Giant, yeah?
I have been. And I'm kind of happy that the way Alioth works It's not as intuitive I would have expected. Like basically so if you have an absorbing man behind Supergiant, the absorbing man, so Alioth will proc on turn 6, deleting all unrevealed cards from turn 6. However, the Supergiant and then the absorbing man will only delete the cards on turn 5. They won't delete all the cards, which I actually think is a kind of strange interaction. I don't quite buy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's her best home. Like, if people want to know, like, the Alliance synergy here, it allows you to afford to play anything on 5. Like, you just play whatever you want on 5. And then what's great is if you have priority on Supergiant's turn, like when everything plays out, you know you have priority going into turn 6, which is very rare to lock that in that early. So then you just play Alioth on 6, wherever that 5 was, and then you accordingly adjust to it. So it could still be awkward, but Alioth obviously very much loves her. And then you're right, less archetype specific, more card specific, and I'm sure a lot of our decks are going to highlight that. I know you've been doing a little bit of the, because we kind of called her somewhat of an invisible woman. Remember, a tiny bit around that. So I assume you've been doing a little Attuma action.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. We did kind of hint at the fact that there was potential like invisible woman style synergy, and I leaned right into it hard. And I developed a deck called Super Invisible, and it is highly susceptible to Alioth. Let's just say right off the bat, if you're playing against an Alioth player, you got to be counting your cubes and ready to run. But if it's not an Alioth player, and I climbed so fast with this deck, basically the deck is 0, Titania, Ebony Maw, Armor, Invisible Woman, Lizard, Maximus, Gladiator, Supergiant, Attuma, Spider-Woman, and Magneto.
That's your
You
list?
might have to rewind that. You might have to rewind that and listen to it again, because that is a hodgepodge of cards.
Did you make this? Like, you made this from scratch, this exact list?
I made it from scratch live on Twitch TV with a blank slate. I'm like, hey guys, let's do it right now, the Invisible Woman list. And I had an idea in my head. I had like the basis for it. And buddy, it was so fun to play for 2 reasons. One, no one knew what the hell I was doing. Everyone I was playing against was like, bro, what is, like, they could not fathom what was happening on the board. Yeah. And this sounds silly, but while you're ranking up, it matters. Feasting on bots. They were clown snapping because there's no power on the board, right?
Dude, that's insane. This is insane. So very similar. We were close. I had Martyr in there instead of Ebony, even though I love the Ebony with Invisible Woman. Love it. He scares me whenever I get him like too late. I had that. I had Taskmaster in there as well. But this is sick, man. I've seen this out there. The Spider-Woman, man. Oh, what a great offense card, man, right? Like for Supergiant. It's nasty.
It's a really fun card to just apply with Supergiant too. But the key thing about it is like no one really expects you to have behind an Invisible Woman, Maximus, Titania, like that. Just those 2 cards. That's a lot of power. And they'll be like, haha, here's the Cosmo, snap. And I'm like, okay, like,
right.
Whoa, you know what I mean? You're Cosmo and my Maximus, what am I gonna do? And the amazing thing about like Attuma is the end of game trigger of both Supergiant and the Invisible Woman make it so Attuma survives. That's 10 power on a 4-drop. Like, it's so good. I had so much fun playing this deck. The Magneto disruption was just wild, and they would people would just be like, I don't even know what happened in this game. I just throw my hands up and give up.
I will give you dude, what I love about this, right? And this is where it's like I love that you have been a part of the Invisible Woman hype train for a while. Like in your first tournaments, you were doing this Attuma stuff. That was before Alive too. Good God, what a world, right? And now it's come like full circle, and you got Supergiant to do it as well. I mean, just the stat stick of Attuma is insane. And guess who can fit right into that list, dude? Is Cole Obsidian. I mean, he's just gonna. There's already 1-drops in here. He could just sneak on in there, yeah.
You're right. The deck gets better. It just has to, right? That's a great call out of Cole Obsidian. I actually had never thought about that. And I mean, listen. Technically, can you 0 Call Obsidian? Why would you 0 Call Obsidian? But technically, he could absorb the 0 hit anyway if you like don't want to play 0 somewhere else. But yeah, like Call Obsidian could fit in here. But I just really like the idea of being creative, coming up with a deck that like honestly, like no one knew what I was doing. And that's like the people listening, that's one of the beautiful things about doing it like an amazing brew. Like get out there, be creative, make a brew. And then when you take it onto the ladder and it's your hot, like spicy sauce and no one knows what you're doing, you can take people by surprise. You have the advantage when they have no idea what you're doing. And I felt it. I felt it with this brew. It was completely out from left field and it's performing really well. Actually, in fact, it is currently the top performing Supergiant deck for getting to Infinite 90 to 100 right now, which is pretty cool.
Man, it's beating the lockdown one. I mean, I'm blown away. You're a madman. You're the new Aristotle of deck creation. I think Supergiant is super unique. That was terrible, but she brings so much to. Like, you don't have to play her. This is what people don't understand. Like, she's so great. She rewards players, in my opinion, kind of like Sarah in the sense of if you know decks and you know what's being played out there in the meta, Supergiant is that much better. Like, obviously, if you see a Thor, it's pretty telling. Like, all right, throw that down there. But if you know, okay, I'm playing Darkhawk, Leech is probably in here, and you sneak this in. Like, there's so many cards that really benefit here. And, yeah, your opponent can change their game plan up, but they were really depending on that Leech or the Jane or the Sarah. You know, we could continue. So overall, I love Supergiant. I think she's going to be here to stay. And we say all the time they get better over time, but truly, it's more of as people forget about her, she's going to get a lot better.
There's no doubt about it. This card's going to age like fine wine, as we like to say here on the podcast. And another major synergy, much like Taskmaster, is Mystique. Don't sleep on that. Like you can play something like turn 5 Mystique and something like a Master Mold, turn 6 Ronin. And she'll pick up on the Ronin, right? Which is pretty cool. So yeah, Taskmaster, Mystique, fantastic for setting up power states, especially since like that'll prevent a Shang-Chi play, right? It makes it so your Ronin's not sitting there on turn 5 waiting to get punched. It's harder to time the Shang-Chi on turn 6, right? And that takes us to the Black Swan. Now, Black Swan, Cozy, listen, I'm ready. I was actually really scared to record this pod this week, man. No, I was nervous, man.
So I was entrenched in work, right? Like I was just trying to survive, and I did a Black Swan video, and someone commented on it like, "Oh wow, opposite than Alex's opinion," and I commented like, "No, actually, like, because I gave her a 3.5 overall." And they're like, I was like, actually, Alex gave it like a good rating. They're like, oh no, he totally shifted wins on Black Swan, which I found out through a comment rather than just talking to you, which I found hilarious. Okay, man. Yeah, so Black Swan, I gave her a 4 last week because kind of what I thought. If you have a deck with just ones or you're relying on Hitmonkey, what do? Even with the good value, you were on the 5-star train, buddy. So where are you now? So
I was on the 5-star train, and then while I was playing it, I kind of hung out the window and just let the trees like hit me in the face until I smartened up a little bit. It's not a 5-star card. It's not. You know what, man? I got caught up in the cost reduction. I'm sorry, everybody. Sneaky. It is so hard to evaluate cards in advance. I still think there might be a Shauna play here. I'm going to work on that deck. Maybe she becomes 5-star with Shauna. Who knows? But man, she's not 5-star.
No. I mean, we can move on from that. But what is she? What is she then?
You know what? Honestly, I think she's currently playing like a 3-star. However, I think there's going to be a deck that gets figured out where she's a 4.
Yeah, but her stat line's 3.5. That's the thing. Like, I've seen people like, oh, she's terrible. She's not a 3.5. Like, guys, she's a 3.5 regardless with no downside. Yes, I get it. It's a deck slot. She's really performing in Thanos. She's performing in Bounce to a good degree as well. There are case scenarios where you can really utilize it. But most of the time, you're, like, kind of skipping the energy. It's like, it could just be awkward, like, in general. Like, I don't know about you, but I'd like have a 1 cost and I'm like, oh, I could play them both together, but I guess I'll just play Black Swan so I can have it for free. Like, it was kind of awkward in that. Zoo in Thanos has had promise. I've seen some promise there, but definitely not 5-star. I still think she's a good card around 3.5 though.
You know what? Honestly, stats wise, she's running 54% win rate, positive cube rateable 0.39, 7% of the meta, and compared to something like a Supergiant was precisely 54%, so the same. Slightly higher cube rate on Supergiant at 0.47. Supergiant's double the meta usage at 14%. Kind of crazy to think that a Spotlight card is outperforming double the play rate of Black Swan, a Season Pass card.
Secondaries and Stitches, they weren't planning on that, I don't think, at all. But for me, man, I've been playing a ton of her in Dracula Dump, the old school classic of just tons of 1-drops. I don't know about you, but if you're playing Black Swan, you can't just do 2/1 drops. Like, I get it. You could just have the value, and if you play her, then 0 is technically you're getting like 3/8 value, whatever. But the decks that truly want to capitalize on the explosion of 1 cost, I think is where she really shines.
This might sound ridiculous, but when I was experimenting and trying to deck design around Black Swan, I was reminded of Havoc. I know this sounds like a really bizarre comparison, but Havoc was a card you never played on turn 2, and Black Swan's a card you never play on turn 3. That's kind of the way it felt the decks were designed, whereas like Black Swan was essentially Black Swan and Falcon was like a turn 5 play, just like Havoc was Havoc and Wave, so that you can like, you know, then play like a Doctor Doom on the 4 energy plus a 1-drop or whatever. And it worked, but like you needed to draw right, you needed like all these extra pieces. I don't know about you, Cozy, I never felt confident playing Black Swan straight up as a 3/5 on turn 3 because I wanted to make some magic happen. I wanted the combo to pop. I wanted to save for the hit monkey. Maybe I was being too greedy. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we were being too greedy.
No, I mean, I think the deck's being greedy with not having enough 1 cost is probably where that came from. Like, what I thought of, and you are correct, you don't want to play her on 3 if you're hit monkey because you just want to go off of the giant. You want to combine Mysterio with Hitmonkey, and then you do the giant pop-off. That's typically what you want to do. And it's kind of smarter because you have more time to evaluate the board and where you need to drop the monkey. Like, that's obviously really important. But yeah, a good chunk of the time, it's like, what are you playing on 4? You know, it's just kind of weird feeling in general and just didn't always seamlessly work together. I tried it in just about everything. I didn't try it in High Evo. You play a ton of that damn archetype. Did you play her in High Evo? Did you try the Sunspot Nebula Misty Knight? I thought maybe there.
No, I didn't. I did not try in High Evo, but I don't imagine it would be great there because I think those cards you want out on curve, you never want to hold them back, and you never really want to bounce them because if you're floating energy, you want their effects to be popping.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Swan's good there. Swan's been kind of difficult to place. It's funny that like, I gotta be honest with you, I didn't think Black Swan was going to be great in Thanos. Like, I was like, why do you need to make the stones free?
So good.
But honestly, one of the absolute top performing Thanos decks right now, we'll read through it. Jeff, Lockjaw, Kyera, Black Swan, there she is. Shang-Chi, Supergiant, that's Supergiant deck too. Devil Dinosaur, Vision, Blob, Thanos, Scar, Magneto. So you switch out a couple cards, get a little greedier with Black Swan and Supergiant, and you got yourself a banger list, one of the top performing Thanos decks. So she's doing the job.
I think the review, though, I gave on her is like, yeah, she's doing her job, but also Bounce and Thanos were the 2 lists where she's in the most. Both of those lists do not need her. Like, at the end of the day, they don't need her. And that truly just highlights a card, right? Like, Supergiant, no one's doing what she does, man. No one's doing what she does. Those decks don't need her. And that's where the problem is. We don't have a deck right now, maybe Dracula Dump, but like that's like you have to have Black Swan to get the most effective gameplay. There's not another card that can do this.
Yeah, and one thing worth mentioning too is like this kind of has like a Ravonna feel to it, where it's like, just like we said with Ravonna and with Darkhawk, and I mean even to some extent Silver Surfer, every single 1-drop that comes out, right?
Yes.
You evaluate on how does it work with Black Swan? Will Black Swan have a, you know, kind of an impact on it? And technically, 10 years from now, Black Swan has to be better than it is now because there's going to be more 1-drops that it can be providing synergy with, right? And I still think there's a potential for Shauna. I still think there's some untapped potential here. It's still very early, but honestly, the card is performing. The win rates are good. But I think it's because, just as you said, Cozy, it was being added to shells that were already performing. They didn't need Black Swan.
It's like Scar. Scar had a similar thing where it's like, oh, let's try to make Scar work in here. And it's like, well, why? It already did good. Sure, it already did good. Whatever, right? And that's what it reminds me of. But also, like, I just want to remind people, like, dude, every card doesn't need to be broken, right? So, like, I'm, for one, glad she's not a 5/5 star, right? Like, she's not the best card. She's good. She's a great card. You know, people don't have that immense level of FOMO if they can't get her because ultimately right now she's replaceable.
It kind of reminds me of what it felt like with Loki, right? We were so pleasantly surprised with Loki and how powerful it was. And then like within like 2 days, we're like, this card's so good. This card's so good. It's all I'm seeing. It's all I'm seeing.
High Evo.
Right? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like so sad.
Yeah, dude, we've seen that in the past, right? Like people get so hyped up about a card only to hate it like a week later. And in Black Swan, you know, surely is not going to have that effect. But it was really cool. It was, you know, we only get a couple of these where 2 cards come out. It's always at the beginning of the season. These are a really fun 1 and 2, right? Yeah. Like Hope Summers is the next one, so I don't know what comes out with that. But like, I love how diverse the beginning of the season is now with the double drop.
It is super diverse, and you had the patch changes and everything else. So a lot to talk about. Star rating, Cozy, what do you think?
Yeah, it's 3.5. You got to give her. I mean, she has a 3.5 stat line. I can't get mad about it. So I give her like an edge over 3-star, but she's not like transcendent.
Okay, and I think that's going to take us to our top 10 one-cost cards. I mean, hey, Black Swan loves one-cost cards, so naturally it's the time that we got to talk about the one-cost cards. Now, Cozy and I actually did a combined list here. Usually we go back and forth. We're going to try something a little different here. I got to be honest with you, Cozy, we were pretty similar. I think you swapped just a couple places here and there. I'm not surprised with the couple that he changed, but we'll get into that there. But I think I'm actually really looking forward to this. For the most part, we agreed with these cards.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely ones that stand out more than others, and it's always tough ranking them in scenarios because you like to think of the deck, not the card, right? Like, well, that card is amazing in that deck, but like, what is it doing? Like, what what does it perform in the deck? But let's get it started, man. What do we got?
Yeah, let's start with our honorable mentions. Let's go through the couple of honorable mentions here that we love but didn't make the list. Not in the top 10 for me. I have to share some love. It has to be Misty Knight. Listen, I know Misty Knight's not sexy. It's not flashy. I mean, that variant might be sexy, but like, what I mean is that like, there's nothing insane about Misty Knight on paper, but I'm telling you, if you don't believe me, go deep into the stats. She makes high Evo better. Just straight up. This card gives a deceptive amount of power, a deceptive amount of reach. It is very good. It is understated for how good this card does. It doesn't make the top 10 because it's a one-trick pony, but it's damn good in that deck.
Yeah, no question about it. What other honorable mentions do we have?
If I have to go with one last one for me, and I'm going to give you space for one too, can I just say Echo? Still love Echo. It was a little hotter with the Miss Marvel play, right? Maybe Omega Red making a bit of a comeback, but Omega Red's not as easy to predict its location as Miss Marvel was. You could throw Echo mid. I still love Echo, but I do think that she's a little fallen off a little bit considering the circumstances around Miss Marvel getting nerfed and Omega Red having a resurgence. But I still love Echo.
I was shocked that you had Echo out of yours, and I was like, all right, because Echo was like your darling for a while there. It's funny. Mine is going to be I got two. Quinjet would be on mine. Now it's here. Now, when we have Valentina, we have a couple cards coming out, right? The more times we get these kind of cards coming out, Quinjet, is going to reap the benefit. I kind of feel like Quinjet on one is fantastic. Anywhere else is kind of and it's tough to find its place and footing, especially with cards like Zabu just dominating that role or Ravonna dominating that role so much. Definitely a card I love, but kind of falls out of the top 10. Also, just like a shout out to like the zeros, so like between zero. Honestly, 1.5 has been great for Martyr. I've been loving that. And Titania to a degree. I probably wouldn't put Titania in my top list. But these two kind of just been working in their deck well. Zero's finding his place again in those style of decks. Let's get to the actual top 10, though, man. I think people might be surprised with some of the list.
Number 10, as elected by Cozy and Alex, is Iceman. Iceman, I think, is coming back in full fashion here because, I mean, listen, a lot of people are making very tight decks. They're trying to make sure that they're hitting specific markers, energy-wise, power-wise, combo-wise, and you know what says no? Iceman says no. Add him to a bounce shell, and you got a major problem on your hands as he bounces back and forth. I mean, one of the most irritating cards in Snap, but only for your opponent.
Yeah, dude, I've seen people try to take him out of the bounce list, and I'm like, guys, you will find out quickly how good Iceman is, especially when you can play him twice, 3 times in some cases, and definitely is the unsung hero because you don't get to see what he's doing, but definitely insane.
Yeah, if you could see what he was hitting, you'd be like, oh, I just hit their Sarah, that's unbelievable, snap. Or like, oh, I hit their Modok, snap. Like, you are doing damage. Like, you're doing an immense amount of damage. Even if they're playing a Zabu-based deck and you hit their Darkhawk, all of a sudden they can't Darkhawk on turn 6 with Shang-Chi. You know what I mean? Like, it is detrimental.
I'm sure we'll talk about the bacon here coming up, but if he was a 1/1 with that effect where you could see what you hit, he would be one of the best one-cost cards in the game.
Yeah, I think there's some significant, like, placebo effect. I don't know if that's the right word, where people just, you're not appreciating what you're doing because you just don't see the effect, right? Yep. But regardless, Iceman at number 10. Did you just talk about Ham, Cozy?
Is Ham
Did you talk about Ham? What do we got at number 9?
Spider Ham, right after the Iceman, who maybe a lot of people might have thought this could have gone much higher. And there are games where it can, right? There are games like no question about it. It has won you the game. And then there are others where you're like, okay, great. That doesn't do all too much. I would probably have Spider-Ham a little higher in Conquest too, rather than just like general ladder play, if that speaks for something.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you gotta love Ham's flexibility and just overall where it can work, and it's important in every meta game. I'm actually second questioning like if it could go higher because it is almost that important depending on what's floating out there in the meta.
You know what? On looking at her list, he could even rise like 2 higher, honestly. And maybe that's a discussion we have at the end of our top 10. But like, listen, I love Spider-Ham as much as Spider-Ham loves potatoes because like, listen, it's funny. You had to sell me on Spider-Ham. I was off the Spider-Ham train for a while. And you're like, no, Alex, this card's cracked. You were one of the first believers back at 1-1. When it got nerfed to 1-1, everyone just slept on it. It was like, nah, this card sucks now. And you were like one of the very first to be like, wait a minute, guys. I think this card still might be good. And here we are talking about it as one of the best 1-drops in the game. And it was part of my Zabu Ray Bill shell. It's been part of a lot of Lockjaw based decks. And you're right, in Conquest, it's filthy. And you know what? When I'm playing against someone, they're playing Spider-Ham, I feel just agitated because they're always hitting the thing you don't want them to hit, right?
Yeah.
Why is Sarah always on the left side of your hand? Well, because it's an expensive card sitting and you're not playing it and it falls to the left. I do like Spider-Ham a lot. It's a good call.
Next up on the list, we've got the Hood, who is at just has always been at a good spot in Snap, right? Like the demon play and being able to capitalize on that. Annihilus obviously skyrocketed his value in general. You can Bast him, you can Viper if anyone's still playing that card, and or just destroy him. And he has that low-key kind of 1 in a million chance to win you Bar with No Name just outright, which is always like one of the most fun things to do with him. Yeah, dude, listen, a 1/6 demon, sign me up. All about it.
Yeah, Hood's had a major resurgence because obviously Annihilus is huge too, right? And a lot of the bounce decks love bouncing the Hood back, getting multiple demons. And then the other side to that as well is like you're even seeing some Bast. Bast is making a bit of a comeback here and there, and obviously Basting a Hood is just a massive power swing. And then you get like, getting a little inebriated, you end up Basting your demon. That feels bad. I've done that before.
Every time.
Right? But at the end, it's one of the benefits of playing bounce decks, right? You just bounce your demon back and then Bast it, right? But I do agree Hood is in a great spot right now, and it's one of the best packages in the 3-card packages in the game. Hood, Sentry, Annihilus. You can add that to almost anything, and honestly, it performs. So very worthy of our number 8 spot.
And at number 7 then, Alex, we've got Forge, buddy. Good old Forge. And listen, Forge is what he was when he came out, but he's one less. And really talk about just putting him in any deck and making it work, right? Like there's most cards in the game can benefit with the power, and then some cards can really benefit with the power. I don't know if you've just done something as simple as like Forge Gladiator, but good God, it's like it just works together. The old days of the Forge and Brood, Forge and Deadpool. He's located in a lot of the lists, and that reason alone, we could not leave him too much lower than that. Forge is just a superstar, man. Without
question, one of the superstars of Marvel Snap right now, and obviously every single bounce list is going to use him because he just generates so much value, allows him to get so vertical. And there's another card that can get surprisingly vertical at number 6 on this list, and it's a card that got recently buffed heavily, but not itself. Its effect got buffed significantly, and that is the Black Knight. Black Knight coming in at number 6 for Cozy and I. Talk about one of the most elegant and honestly heavy-handed buffs we've seen in a while. That Ebony Blade feels completely unstoppable. The targeted discard effects of Blade, Sif, and others have really elevated Black Knight and that particular shell of discard as a whole. Honestly, love this card, love what it's been doing. It's fallen down in win rate slightly since its kind of major kind of takeoff earlier last season, but it's still phenomenal.
Because it's getting involved in Hella. I think mainly, you still got a little bit of that chaos in there, but I think if we were to just talk about 1-cost cards in decks that have like the biggest performance, it's Black Knight. Like he's such a difference maker. The Ebony Blade is so ridiculous, but you gotta have a lot of things kind of go right. Not necessarily everything, but there are some times where Black Knight is virtually not doing his job correctly. But for 1 drop, for what he does, I love it. And I would actually like to see more of this style of card where you play something on 1 and then something has to happen and then you get a card in return. I think that's such a cool aspect, and I would love to see that outside of just the discard archetype. Next up, Alex, though, we've got another card that could be discarded, but you don't do it half the time. We've got X23, and I got to say, man, there's no point in playing Destroy these days if you're not including X23, just because of the significant impact that she has, getting into locations that are closed down, ramping you up continuously, allowing you to just have access to destroy more, but to also play more. And then we even see her in lists with that run, you know, the craziness of like Silver Samurai. We've seen that with Doc in play too. X23 and her sheer importance to destroy is just too crazy to pass up, and outside Deadpool is not competing for that spot in those archetypes.
It's been a remarkable card, and it's been one of those cards that have been consistently a performer. It raises the Destroy archetype to a whole other level. It's in every single Destroy deck. It never gets cut. It's even like been played with Hulkbuster. Like people just say, well, I don't have Deadpool, I'm gonna Hulkbuster this X23, get the value for Venom by carnaging it, get the value from whatever for the null value of venoming it and all this stuff. Let it bounce into locations that it can't otherwise access. And obviously, it sets up null Deadpool on turn 6, right? Which is pretty cool, or whatever have you. Null Deadpool and a death on turn 6, right? It's crazy what one extra energy can do for Destroy. And listen, X23 lets you do exactly what Destroy wants you to do. That's destroy cards, get energy to destroy more cards. So, absolutely remarkable card. Another one that you were hot on in August. And once again, very top-notch call out there. As we move to number 4. Number 4 on our list is a perennial performer. Used to be one of the absolute best cards in the game, and it's Sunspot. There was a time where it's kind of funny to think, but Sunspot as a 1/1 was regularly getting to absolutely astronomical numbers. We didn't even have high Evo at the time, which is kind of crazy, but Sunspot was still regularly at 1/7, 1/8. We were talking about how the card was absolutely broken, and guess what? Now we have high Evo, and I regularly see Sunspots that I can Shang-Chi, which is kind of crazy, right? So Sunspot has continued to be an absolute massive stat stick, but I also don't think there's a card that dies more to Killmonger. Thankfully, Kaira's out to save the day.
Yeah, and Shadow King, his presence going to a 2/2 has hurt. You know, talk about a card that just dies whenever Shadow King comes out. But Kaira has been massive for Sunspot. Kind of crazy, though, because if I see a Sunspot now, I just immediately think it's a high Evo deck, and that's kind of what it's been tied to, where he was way more flexible, and I still think he is, right? But people really tied down to that deck just because he has that extra synergy. And there's not, not to say Spider-Ham and things like that aren't great, but Sunspot synergizes with Infinite, with She-Hulk, and with these cards. And on top of that, he also allows you to not always have perfect curve, which could be punishing with Red Hulk, but for now, really good.
And now, Cozy, we're into our top 3 best 1-drops in the game, and these are absolute bangers, ridiculous bangers. And I got to tell you, I'm really excited to go through this here because we switched up a couple of them back and forth. I mean, listen, as we talk through them, we can switch them back. But number 3 is the one that I originally had at number 2, Cozy, but we switched it. And that was Nebula. And we'll let the comments section decide if Cozy's number 2 is certainly better than Nebula. You could probably guess what it is already. But Nebula coming in at number 3. Is this not one of the absolute best cards in Snap that low-key gets no complaints, put up incredible power, is one of the best design cards in Snap, and also one of the most powerful 1-drops in the game.
One of the best design. I hope we see more of like this nature. And like, it's crazy because you have so many things running through your head when you play against Nebula. How much do you play into that lane? Should you be playing into that lane? Do you abandon that lane? Is it too hard to catch up on? She creates pressure, and I love that. Very unique card and definitely one of the best.
Yeah, and I love the control element that Nebula brings. And honestly, it's like when I play against Nebulas, I find myself making suboptimal plays because I'm like, I don't want that Nebula getting +2, but I should be playing over here. And so like that control part, I think people undersell how powerful it is. To the point, don't forget the Nebula was being played in Galactus decks because it was encouraging people to play into singular locations and opening up additional options for Galactus when they got waved out or electroed out, right? So Nebula can be surprisingly tricky. And Cozy, I originally had Nebula number 2, but you were determined to make a switch, and you, my friend, traded Nebula for another lady.
Nico Minoru.
Nico Minoru.
I had
Minoru. I still don't even quite sure how to say the name, but yeah, Nico. And listen, I'm all for it, but I want you to make the pitch here.
Yeah, so obviously Nebula is way more consistent, right? But you also have to play her out earlier, whereas Nico just has that flexibility on the turn, on the ability in archetypes and in decks. Nico is right up there with number 1 for me, and not only one of my favorite cards, but what she brings to the table. Nebula is a great card with the consistency of power. Nico can push you over the top and just win you games, man. I don't know if you've had to listen, they're all great, and yeah, just destroying a card for 2 is fine and dandy. being able to clone your card, bro, whenever I get to see this symbol, I'm like, I have to play her. I got to get another Venom. I got to get another Hitmonkey. Like, there's so much value in her here. So Nico for sure is my number 2.
Listen, I don't know what you're talking about. Nico's not consistent. The most consistent thing in my Marvel Snap experience is Nico turn 1 into Deadpool Destroy Draw 2 turn 2 every single time. Like every single player I've ever played against playing Destroy has that exact combo in that exact order and is of course already snapped, right? So like maybe that's why Destroy is so damn high in the win rates here, because Nico Minoru keeps absolutely I'm saying it wrong on purpose at this point, but honestly, it is a remarkable card, and this is such a beautiful, elegant design. Ain't nobody complaining about Nico being OP. It is perfectly fun, perfectly balanced, perfectly powerful, perfectly chaotic, perfectly low rolling. It is everything that's perfect about Marvel Snap in one card. By far one of the best ones they've ever designed. The amount of effort that went into creating this with all the different spells, all the different effects was worth it. The only thing I would ask, and I don't know if this happens to you, but when Nico comes into my hand or at this, like, show me the logo right off the top. Like, why does it not show me right away? Why do I have to click the card first? It's kind of a silly bug.
And she like zips over to the right location sometimes, like without even meaning to. I don't know if that happens to you, where she just like places herself there. Has that happened to you?
No.
Oh, dude, maybe it's just maybe I just suck. But are people confused at number 1? You think then?
Number 1, I think it can't be a surprise, right? Like, there's no way it's a surprise. We just talked about number 1. Like, yeah, we just brought his name up like 4 times, like in the discussion here. It's Deadpool. It has to be. It's always been. I mean, Deadpool is absolutely insane right now. The target of these nerfs, and it's kind of funny how like, what do you do to Deadpool? Because it's one of those examples where you don't have a lot of dials. So they were laughing. People were like, oh, look at this. They're nerfing Hulkbuster to nerf Deadpool. LOL. Like, why don't you just nerf Deadpool? It's like, well, it's a 1-drop. It's a 1/1, and it doubles the power. What dials do you have? You make it a 1-1, so it goes negative when it doubles? Like, if you make it 0, then it literally cannot be doubled?
Yeah.
What do you do?
And I'm scared because the movie hasn't even come out yet. And you know when the movie comes out, he's going to get like an OTA to be like a 1-2. No, I honestly, man, Deadpool is the reason why Destroy is so tough. And a combination of things. But it's a 1-cost commitment on an archetype now with X-23. Like, it's the merriment of all of it. We have to appreciate that. Like, Deadpool wasn't where he was when Nico and X-23 and some of these cards weren't, exactly where they were. But Venom, being able to get a Deadpool for like 24 power, then you Venom eat it, and then you have 2 lanes. Like, it's just too much to put up with. And then you always have the opponent guessing. Do they have Death? Do they have Null? Are they going to be able to play Deadpool and Death? I don't know. How many cards have they destroyed? I don't have a tracker. I'm on mobile. It's just tough, man. And Deadpool is rightfully the number 1-cost card.
There's no question about it. Deadpool comes in at number 1 in our top 10 list. And Cozy, I can't wait to do this again. I really like the idea of doing it kind of together, by the way. I'd be interested in hearing your feedback in the comments section, what you guys think. I do like when, like, I forget a card and Cozy makes it number 1, like when I forgot Thanos and stuff. That's also fun, but this is also great too. So thank you so much for joining in on the fun. As we move to the Snapchat mailbag, we got a few questions here that we're going to be going through. And there's a couple absolute beauties. And when I specifically took a couple that aren't about Marvel Snap to kind of dig into a couple other topics here as well. So The first question is coming from Mr. Fro. Are you concerned about new cards lacking store variants? No card from the Scar season had a variant released into the store, season pass and spotlight only, and Beta Ray Bill is the only card that has a data mined variant with no release date. It looks like the Black Order season is set to be the same. I asked this, Cozy, because I know you're a man of the variants. What are your thoughts?
I feel like the more we get into unique characters, the less variants we're going to have. So a great example is I was looking up a bunch of lore on Black Swan. Not a super popular character, and pretty much all the art has been commissioned for games. And so, like, I think the more we go into these characters, the less variants and just public art there is to buy. You can almost tell when something's been commissioned for Snap, right? Like, you can almost look at it and be like, oh, this looks like it was just made to be a Marvel Snap card. I feel like we could edge towards that a bit more. Which I do. I like and I hate, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know about you. I've got like 9 billion Deadpools at this point. But also, like, yeah, it would be really great to be able to have more options for something like Scar. So, if you miss out on the season pass, you're done. So hopefully they can continue to commission the art. But that's my guess on the why, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense. Like, for instance, like Sarah is technically like a very kind of obscure hero in like the Marvel universe, right? But happens to be a really awesome card in Snap. Not many variants, but it has an awesome ultimate, right? It's funny because variants, I've kind of come around on spending more money on variants. I tried to like avoid it, but like when there's art germ in the shop, I got to get it. And I'm really looking forward to the selectable borders and obviously the mastery system. It's going to reward the collectors out there, which I think is a really important part of the game. I know my son will literally flip through my phone and just look at the art. Yeah. Like he's like, oh, it's Iron Man, and oh, it's Wolverine, and look at all the Wolverine variants. He sees the pixels, he's like, what the hell is this? Our next question comes from Justin Alexander, and it reads, have either of you played Slay the Spire? In my opinion, it's one of the best card games ever made, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Love the podcast, and happy snapping.
Oh, dude, such a good game. I mean, it combines so much. You know what? I played it even before I was like hyper into card games too, and it got me into that style. I feel like that genre is untapped too. Like, I feel like you could do more with that, kind of like having a overall arching game within a card game kind of thing, or card game within an over, you know what I mean? Super fun game. If people have not played it and you enjoy Snap, it's a no-brainer, man. Have you played?
I have. I played quite a bit of it, and I did like it a lot. A very, very fun game to play. It actually was kind of like my gateway drug into those types of card games. I liked Slay the Spire, but I loved Monster Train. Monster Train was another one that had kind of like it had the multiple levels. You played the cards out. I loved Monster Train, and that was so much fun as well. And then ultimately, it's funny because like card games, now that like I play card games like for way too much of my time, they creep up in fun places. Like even like Midnight Suns at its core is a card game, right? And it's actually kind of like a social simulator, to be honest with you, but at its core it's a card game, and it really is fun. And I think Marvel Snap has some transferable kind of skills there. But yeah, Slay the Spire I think was one of the first major like indie card games to like really take off on Steam, and then it kind of propelled other card games to do something similar. I'm looking forward to more. I'm always looking for a new card game that's of similar design, of similar style. I think we're getting more like Slay the Spire inspired games, which are like, you know, card game roguelikes with different branching kind of abilities and like those classic deck builders on the fly, right? Yeah, love the call out. Huge fan of Slay the Spire. And that takes us to Different World Skating. That's the name, and the question reads, what's up, boys? Love the content. Wanted to take this one off topic of Snap. We need to get to the real questions here. Being an Italian skater, I've always wondered, Cozy, who's your favorite skater, your favorite brand, and your favorite trick? I'm assuming they're referencing skateboards. And Alex, God tier pasta noodle, best cold cut for a sandwich, and my favorite football team. So we'll let you go, Cozy, first. Favorite skater, favorite brand, favorite trick. And I'll let you go surfboard if you need to cop out and go full California.
Oh man, I mean, how do I not pick Tony Hawk? Like, for whatever reason, when I played the Tony Hawk games, I love Bob Burnquist or whatever his name was. He was like the second guy with the glasses. Anyway, yeah, I would. For me, it's the OG GOAT. He's from San Diego, man. Tony Hawk did so much for the sport. I remember going to see him, plenty of times. So that was huge for me. As far as the brand, I don't have like a particular brand that I stick with skateboarding in that regard. But definitely like, first of all, they're all pretty BA. But I would say, yeah, surfing is more of my go-to, if you will. But just natural. I've been snowboarded a skater. When you first said it, dude, I thought they were talking about like ice skating or something. I was like, what the hell? What about you? What was your question? Favorite cold cut?
I'll go through my questions, but first, you have to. Can you please yell, do a kickflip?
Do a kickflip.
Perfect. That's all I wanted. We just need that. We need that clip, guys. You got it. That's all you need there. For me, the question was, what was my favorite pasta noodle, best cold cut sandwich, and favorite football team? By football, I believe they mean soccer team. My favorite god tier pasta noodle, always been a fan of rigatoni. Just never steers you wrong, right? For my best cold cut sandwich, love prosciutto. You can't go wrong with a good piece of prosciutto. And my favorite football team / soccer team has always been AC Milan. And my dad is an Inter Milan fan, which is an Italian soccer club. So my dad actually played for Ascoli back in the day. So yeah, which is kind of cool. It's like a semi-pro team, a pro team in Italy. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
Some skill transferred on to me, but not all the skill. I never made it pro.
Dude, that's awesome. That's I learn something new about my podcast partner every day.
Yeah, listen, you got to teach me how to surf, and I got to teach you how to play soccer, and probably skate and shovel snow. And
my highest viewed video would be teaching Alex Coccia how to surf.
I would definitely be, and no one would want to see that. And I would be wearing a full life jacket with those little kid little arm floaty
Wet
things,
wings,
water
yeah,
wings.
yeah, water wings. It would come out.
Anyways, with that image in your head, we want to say thank you so much for joining us on today's Snapchat. It really means a lot to us, your support, your viewership, and of course, you guys being the wonderful community that you are. And we'll see you on that next Snapchat episode.